Okay, Mark Riley in Salford Media City, and I have been joined by Michael Rother. Michael, welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Mark. We're happy to be here.
Well, you know, it's taken a lot of organising between yourself and Michelle particularly, and I always doubted it would happen for some reason. So here I am, and I'm absolutely thrilled. So, again, thank you, and thank you to your bandmates. Would you like to introduce your mates, please?
Yes, sure. On guitar, it's Franz Barkmann.
Hello there.
Applause.
One man clapping sounds terrible, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
I'll still do it.
All right. And on drums, it's Hans Lampe.
Yes.
Hello there.
Hello there. Hey,
Good to be here.
there we go. We're going to hire a crowd next time you come and play for us. You're going to do 3 songs for us. Before we get to the music, could I just ask you? I know that you've been touring, and you mentioned that you've been to Russia recently. How was that?
It was exciting. Actually, I've played in Russia twice, but only in St. Petersburg. But this was the first time I played in Moscow. It was demanding, I think, also, quite honestly. They were so enthusiastic. You can't complain about that as a musician. And so I had to do maybe 5,000 interviews.
You mentioned earlier the phrase that you used. You said they squeezed you like a lemon.
That's right. I didn't want to send that over the air. Yeah. I mean, as I said, you can't complain, really. And they were very generous and very happy to do their best to make it work. And the concerts were great. The audiences were very happy. I wasn't that surprised because I played in St. Petersburg. It's not like when we first played in China. I didn't know what to expect there. But the music also works there. It's strange. But
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, it's music. It should be, as we know, it should be an international language, shouldn't it, really? And it's proving to be that way. And, of course, there are comparisons that could be drawn between early 70s Germany and early 70s Russia, because of the underground and people trying to get to good music. That's the way that it appears to me. Is it still a very healthy kind of music community over there?
Honestly, I can't say much about that because I'm not aware of what is happening, really.
Right. Okay.
We did a workshop, guitar workshop, Franz and I. We were invited to do this by the organizers, and there were about 12 or 13 guitar players. Very interesting, very nice and pleasant exchange of ideas. And in the end, we did a crazy jam, like, just everybody playing along. It was like Hallo Gallo, sort of.
Right, amazing. Okay, brilliant. And so I also just need to ask you quickly, how many radio sessions have you done previously? Have you done many?
Not so many. I remember one in Australia. That was in 2012. We did one with Dieter Moebius, Hans Lampe and me.
Right.
For, what was the name? I just talked about that. What was the name of the...
ABC.
ABC? Maybe, yes.
Right, okay.
And yeah, that we played, I think, a whole concert for them, even. Yeah.
Well, we'll get there one day, hopefully, but we'll have to make do with 3 tunes tonight. So what's the first song you're going to do for us then?
It's a song that was only recently added to our set list. Actually, we did it because our friend Alan Tenbaum of Under the Bridge in London asked us to play. It's one of his favorite tracks. And I edited it down, and it seems to work very well. The people in Russia were happy, and also when we played in London last week, was it maybe? And Glasgow and Manchester yesterday. It seems that it has a firm place in the set list now.
Great, okay, so what is it?
Oh, sorry, yes, of
No,
course.
that's okay.
It's been a long tour. The name is Gitarrero.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Michael Rother, thank you. Just wonderful. Michael Rother live in session, and we will have more tunes later on in the programme and a conversation as well. That's as I understand it. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll see you shortly. Mark Riley here, been joined once again by Michael Rother and the guys, and here they are live in session with Neuschnee. Fabulous, absolutely brilliant. Michael Rother live in session, the second song for us tonight. So, Michael, I mean, there is so much to go at in your history that we're not going to go anywhere near covering it. So we're just going to touch upon certain aspects of it, if that's okay.
Yes.
And so you were born in Hamburg.
Right.
I'm going right back to the beginning, so that's not a good start. And then to Munich. But then you ended up just perhaps 12 miles away from the studio in the leafy suburb of Wilmslow. How did that happen?
My father worked first for British European Airways in Germany. And when we moved to England, he started working for Lufthansa. And so I think it was meant as a stopover because we actually only stayed for 11 months in Wilmslow. My mother said it was the happiest time of her life. She was so impressed by the friendliness of the people. I mean, 59, only 14 years after the end of the war.
Sure.
Shouldn't mention the war.
You did, though I didn't.
Yes, and I had good friends there. School was lovely. We went swimming in the river Bollin.
Yeah.
Quite a few people know it. I'm surprised when I meet people at the concerts and Bollin, yeah.
Well, you've got Wilmslow Cars, which is a big park there with the river running through it. It's just absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
It was a very sweet little school. Back then I didn't know, but I noticed when we moved to Karachi, Pakistan, what a difference that was, because I was a pupil at Karachi Grammar School, which was, I think it already had a history of 130 years, dating back to 18-something, 20 years. British founded school with very strict rules. You had to wear a school uniform, even if it was 40 degrees Celsius hot. They once sent me home because I wasn't wearing the right uniform. Anyway, those are the memories. But Wilmslow was just wonderful.
So how old were you when you moved to Karachi?
I was 9.
Right, okay.
In
so
1960. Yeah.
Before you'd reached your teens, you'd already just encountered all these very, very different cultures to the one that you'd grown up with. How was that for you? Was it something that you wanted to explore, or did you just kind of were you bewildered by it a little bit?
I wouldn't say bewildered, but of course back then I didn't foresee the significance of the influences, the impressions I got, especially back then in Pakistan, listening to the music, street musicians playing in scales I hadn't heard before, and this music which to me seemed like not to have a beginning and no end. It was a sort of endless music, and, jumping forward some, 20 years? No, maybe even 12 years.
Right.
It's possible that I sort of picked up that idea of an endless music, which I heard in Pakistan for the first time. And we stayed for 3 years, and I have great memories, also memories of difficult periods, especially with the schooling. When I arrived, do we want to go about that?
Yes, we do. If you don't mind. If you don't mind.
No, just a short one. I don't always want to complain, but they were already learning French, and I was just able to speak English, which I'd learned with my friends in 11 months. As a child, you learn quickly.
Yeah.
But then there were all these teachings, which later I even had to learn Urdu, the local language.
Yeah.
And, there was no chance for me to catch up on that. But the great thing about Pakistan, amongst other things, was the sea. We spent the weekends at the seaside. We had a hut there, a small house. And I was in the water nearly all day long. And, jumping around in the waves. This is also, it has something to do with the music, I guess, being carried by waves like
I can see
an
that.
endless wave.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, well, you're going to play Seeland for us in a bit, and I know it's a bit of a crass kind of association to make, but musically that holds up as well. But then you found yourself back in Germany playing in bands that were influenced by the likes of the Kinks and the Beatles and stuff. But then you had the band. It was called Spirits of Sound.
Yeah,
is that right?
I joined that school. It was a school band. I think 3 of the members were in my class.
Right.
And that was in 1965. We were all totally blown away by the music that came from Great Britain, especially. Like you already mentioned the bands, Beatles, Kings, Stones, later Cream, Yardbirds, Jeff Beck.
So what set you off on this kind of like this weird angle? Because obviously, I mean, you were a member of the fledgling Kraftwerk as well.
You're jumping.
I am, yeah. I mean, quite a way. But I mean, so what did that very early Kraftwerk lineup sound like? Because at one point it was a three-piece with you and Klaus and also Florian Schneider. Did it sound anything like the Kraftwerk that people came to know and love in the mid-70s?
No, not at all.
Right.
No, it was the pre-computer Kraftwerk lineup, and it was very rough, very primitive, very exciting music on good nights. But we failed at recording the second Kraftwerk album, and that's why we split after. We tried to record the album with Conny Plank, and it became clear that the excitement which we created in the concerts couldn't be transferred into the sterile atmosphere of a recording studio, and it didn't work. But I mean, just to fill the gap, between 1965 and 71, there were years of learning the trade of music. I learned to play guitar by copying those heroes. And yeah, the short version is that became boring after a while and no longer satisfied me. And so when I by accident met the Kraftwerk people in early 1971, I was already looking for a complete break from the past. Already for a year I was quite desperate. I thought I was totally alone, but as I found out, because I didn't know the band at the time, I wasn't. So there were a few musicians like Ralf Hütter especially.
Yeah.
I jammed with him and we got along very well, and the others were listening and they picked up the vibe and they thought, yeah, let's exchange phone numbers. And so that's how I joined Kraftwerk.
Right, okay. And so we've already got to the point kind of where you left Kraftwerk with Klaus to form Neu. By all accounts, Klaus was a difficult kind of character. So why did you decide to form a band with him? I mean, you've got a two-piece band with somebody who perhaps it was a little bit later on got a reputation for being notoriously grumpy.
Yeah, well, of course, I knew Klaus for quite a long time. And in the beginning, he was an amazing drummer. He was an exciting drummer. He was a drummer who had so much power and was so thrilling to watch and to play with, something I hadn't experienced before. So that was the positive reason. He was a very inspiring, interesting artist to work with. The difficult parts, there were already some parts of his character which I didn't really like. So I have to say, to be honest, we were never friends. I didn't want to be friends with Klaus, but working with him was just great, especially because we had Conny Plank, who helped us shape those albums.
Sure.
And the difficult part came in the 80s and especially then in the 90s. I'd rather not talk too much about the dark side of Klaus. Myself, I focus on the positive, creative talent he shared with us.
It's something of a cliche, isn't it? But I mean, often friction within bands is very productive, you know. And if you look at Neu 75, which is regarded as one of the great albums, and there was certainly friction while you were making that, but what came out of it was a really, truly beautiful thing.
I wouldn't contradict you, but the thing is, we never really argued about music. That's a misunderstanding.
Right.
We agreed nearly totally on the music.
Right.
whenever the other one did something that was clear and true and strong, the other one said, yeah, that's it. Let's do that. We disagreed about nearly everything outside of the studio.
Right, okay.
Especially later. But now even the two sides of Noise 75, which are sometimes seen as, they were struggling, Michael got the first side and Klaus the second, that's rubbish. Klaus, in the end, he contributed great stuff to the first side, and I won't say I contributed the same to the other side, but I love Hero, for instance. It's one of my favorite Neu tracks. And the guitars I played, Hans was in that session, and he's also on Hero. Oh, that's a nice...
There we go. There's a nice in for me.
Okay, this is funny. But that's really a misunderstanding. We didn't fight about music. We fought about everything else.
There was a stalemate, though, wasn't there? And a lot of silence in one of the particular sessions. And in looking at, you're going to do Seeland next.
It's interesting that you know about the silence because, before we went into the studio, maybe I should just tell you the short version. Klaus and I, we met because we both had ideas for the third Neu. I was working with Harmonia at the time, and they were really what my heart was with. Right. But I had ideas that didn't work with Harmonia. And we had a contract for the third Neu album with Metronome, Brain label. And so we met and we discussed how should we go about. Should we do the album as we did the first two, only the two of us? By the time Klaus was already working with Hans Lampe and his brother Thomas Dinger, and was working on creating what became La Düsseldorf. And so he suggested to do the whole album with the four of us. But I wasn't convinced, and I said, okay, well then let's compromise one side as with the four musicians and the other side only Klaus and me. And and then we started with the rough side, the four musicians playing. And okay, I have to say this, Klaus sort of got carried away, maybe, by his enthusiasm.
Right.
He didn't want to remember that we had this agreement. And I said, Klaus, no, this is how we're going to do it. And I stopped working and we sat in silence. It was like a battle of will, maybe.
Right.
It was rather stupid and silly, but I wouldn't be budged. And in the end, he suddenly got up and said, okay, then let's start working.
Oh, right.
And that's how the first side came up. And he did such great stuff there.
Yeah, well, just amazing, all amazing. And I was going to ask you about the David Bowie connection, but we've done loads. We've covered too much. I've made you talk too much. And I need to credit Rob Hughes in the other room, who gave me a lot of inside information, particularly about the silence. So he's over there, Rob. He's interviewed you previously. So I've mentioned Seeland. You're going to do that for us now, aren't you, Michael?
Yes.
Brilliant.
With pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I'm pinching myself, if I'm honest. Just absolutely staggering. Seeland live in session. Michael, Franz, Hans, thank you so much for making the effort and coming and playing for us. It's just been incredible.
Thank you very much for inviting us. We had a great time.
We'll see you again then.
Yeah. Hopefully.
That would be brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much. Just absolutely brilliant.